morning. Good morning. The regular January 8th County Commission meeting will please be in order. This morning we have Jim Davis, Public Works, will do the invocation, and followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by County Administrator Joe Baird.
Almighty God, maker of heaven and earth, we give thanks for this new year and the challenges that each day brings. Bless our leaders as they serve you and their constituents. Grant them wisdom to discern and govern. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have any additions, deletions to the agenda or emergency items? Proclamations and presentations. The presentation on Winterfest Joint Program by Indian River County Recreation Department and Point West by Chuck Mecklin. Good morning, Chuck.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
I just want to take a moment. I'm glad all the folks turned out to see a presentation on Winterfest.
And they came back from last night.
They're still here from last night.
And what I wanted to do is all too often that departments within the county don't get the proper recognition. I want to say that your recreation department, parks, all worked diligently with us in regards to putting on Winterfest. Cliff, Mike, Scott, Bob, the whole team over there worked relentlessly, and I'll have to say that Scott was just out there coordinating and handling things on behalf of the county, and that day, and the numbers are, I guess, a little up in debate, but certainly there was upwards of 6,000 people that floated through there that day enjoying the event, and some of the folks made it. And what we did is just a short PowerPoint presentation, and from Point West side, our marketing and events director, Karen Mecklin, will show you a little bit of what took place that day.
Good morning. This is a treat for me. I don't usually get to speak.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm thrilled that we get to start on a positive note today because it was a wonderful event, obviously. And I want to expound a little bit on what Chuck said on the thank yous. Obviously, there's a few other people. The key staff did a wonderful job, but we couldn't do this without everyone in the rec department staff. We had over 20 people from the staff there, as well as volunteers. The Parks Department, we want to thank, David Fleetwood for coming out with this. Putting up the tent and bringing the bleachers and everything that we did, there's no way I could do this without them. So I just have to extend all the way down to every single member of that rec department. You should be very proud of your rec department for what they did, from picking up trash to line control. I mean, it's a huge event to execute, and they did a wonderful job. So what I did today for you, I know that your schedules were busy in December, not everyone could attend, so pretty much what I did was put together a presentation that walks you through the event so that hopefully next year you can come, and it'll be bigger and better, but it's kind of just a brief walkthrough of what we did. And so obviously the Fire and Ice theme of the event this year was fireworks and ice skating and snow, and we had a wonderful day. The weather cooperated immensely, which I couldn't thank that enough. Somebody put a good word in for us. So as you came in, obviously the Snow Mountain right here was the main attraction, and obviously standing guard over the Snow Mountain, we have Larry there from who's the facilities manager at your Gifford Aquatic Center. So I don't think anyone got out of control with Larry standing guard. But it was a warm day, a little bit of a melting snow, but that was a wonderful first thing you saw when you came into Winterfest was our Snow Mountain, and there the kids are playing on the snow. That's 20 tons of snow. You'd think it might be more, but actually 20 tons doesn't make a very huge pile. But they had a good time in their flip-flops playing in the snow, so it was a wonderful day for that. We had some great meeters and greeters as you came in, handing out flyers as everyone entered into Winterfest. And then we even had participation of our builders at Point West. Southern Classic Homes had a booth here. Lots of kids came up and colored and had a very good time. So they greeted everyone as they came in. Obviously, the Penguin Pond, which is our ice skating rink, was a wonderful event that everyone enjoys. We put bleachers up this year so people could sit and watch. And that was run extremely well. That's before everyone got there. You can see the skating surface, and we put it undercover this year in case it rains so that we could still have the event. And that's Sue Hansen there, standing guard, watching our ice skaters from the rec department. So obviously it is very slippery. They've got real skates on, and it was hard to stand up for a lot of them. And then we had an inflatable zone called Santa's Fun Zone, bounce houses, big slides, had a great time there. And as I said, the rec department did a wonderful job with line control. We had pony rides. Even the ponies were festive with their hats on. We had balloon artists out there making balloon things for the kids. Obviously, vendors were thrilled. I think every vendor we had sold out that day with that many people. So it was a wonderful Christmas present for them to sell out that day right before Christmas and make some money. We really appreciated that. And we had a golf cart parade. It was a very small parade this year, but they were festive nonetheless, and they came up with their cart for everyone. You can see Hamp Elliott, the radio station, was there doing a live remote, so he was interviewing everyone and making the event just fantastic. Of course, we had lots of entertainment that day. I only have a picture of the Sebastian River High School Jazz Ensemble, but we also had the Vero Beach High School Chorus, and we had the Sensations Dance Team, and so everyone enjoyed. They did a wonderful job entertaining the crowd all day. And then, of course, the guest of honor, Santa Claus arrived in the fire truck, and Mrs. Claus and Rudolph, and the kids were thrilled with that. Obviously, Hamp Elliott interviewed Mr. and Mrs. Claus before they went and sat in their little North Pole house, and Santa had taking photos with everyone. So isn't she just adorable? Photos with Santa was a big hit for the day. And then there's Rudolph posing with Bob as his escort that day. Everyone had a good time with Rudolph. And, of course, we did have one of our county commissioners show up, so we were very happy.
Mike Redstone. Hey, Mike.
With Mike doing the meet and greet, so I think Joe and his family had a good time out there that day.
Yes, we did.
And, of course, you know, when things are going well, we're all very happy. So Cliff and Scott and myself taking a moment to enjoy the festivities because everything was running like clockwork. And, of course, that's just kind of an overview of the crowd. As you can see, we had a huge crowd, as Chuck mentioned, and it was a wonderful day. And our grand finale, which everybody loves, was our firework display at the end of the night. So our fire and ice, you know, couldn't have ended any better, and we appreciate your support of this event every year. And obviously, we'll be back next year for the 5th annual doing our presentation, so we thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Just real quick, I'd like to compliment not just the Point West and the Chuck Meckley and Karen, but the Public Works Department, the Parks and Recreation Department. This is it's events like this that make this community step out from other communities. And this is just one of many. We've got the Frog Leg Festival coming up. We've got other events with the fair. And it's really things like that not just as a commissioner, but as a commission, we are in full support of community events that invite other members of outside of the Point West community out to your community. And we certainly do appreciate all the work that y'all put into it. I heard it was spectacular. Thank you.
And we look forward to the next year.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just,
yes.
we have such a large, attentive audience today, and I just wanted to tell them that what a wonderful experience it was, and if you had any challenges to get into the holiday spirit this year, plan on attending next year, because it will definitely bring you into the spirit, and you don't need children to attend.
Sandals in the snow is really a good thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. May I have approval of the minutes of the regular December 4th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. Regular meeting December 11th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Passes. Consent agenda. Anyone like to pull anything from the consent agenda or discuss anything?
Madam Chairman, we'd like to discuss K.
All right. Anyone else like anything pulled?
Madam Chair, I'd like to pull E and P as in Paul.
P as in Paul?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. When we pull items, can we, when it comes to your turn, please read the items so that the public will know what we're talking about when we pull a letter.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
As amended. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. Number E, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is the 2008 committee appointments and reappointments. And I guess I just had a couple questions about our policy on some of these, and two things. One is, some of the members on all the different boards are marked that they've served more than 2 consecutive terms. I don't know, as a board, do we have a policy that 2 is enough, or do we let them keep going? And my other question is on the attendance. Some of the folks, have fairly dismal attendance records, and even though they're excused, and they may all be valid excuses, they can't get due to work or whatever. But if they're not making the meetings, they're not doing us any good as far as an advisory committee. So I guess I'm just looking for a little clarification of how we have handled this in the past. Or
Does anybody want to clarify it for him?
I have several members on the committees that I enjoy some continuity. And for example, right now, some of the things that we're working on the Ag Advisory Committee, they're pretty in-depth and a very active group, very creative group that I kind of just sit back and I'm, of course, just the liaison to. So I understand what you're saying. If I found some dead wood on there, it gets pruned fast. Not by me, but by the committee. That's how vibrant the committee is and how excited about the work and the advice that they want to give the commission is. But as far as the policy is for whether we have a term limit, I don't think so.
For the commissioners or for committee people?
Okay. Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I went back and looked back quite a ways, and there was only one member that was asked for resignation, and I think it was on the enterprise zone, and because that person hadn't made, I think, any of the meetings. But some of the committees are as low as 50% turnout, and an excused absence, my understanding, is simply a phone call. If you call in, it's an excused absence, regardless of the reason. And some of these committees, I think, really need to, if they've got a consistent conflict, then I think that they should look into their priority, either whatever the conflict is and rescheduling it or resigning from the committee. But I think in some of our most important committees, there's some that have had very, very low attendance, and I think that needs to be addressed. But certainly right now, as long as they call in, it's an excused absence, so there's nothing wrong with it. If they don't call in and they miss 3 consecutive meetings, then they're removed. But I just think they need to prioritize which meeting is more important, the one they're serving here or serving other places, and make a choice, because we need their attendance.
And this is a good time to, since we have a full audience, to anyone who would like to participate. We have numerous committees, and we have an application, and we would be delighted for you to fill out an application and help us out and serve in an advisory capacity. Any other questions?
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I guess we're on the consent agenda. We're being asked to approve a reappointment list that probably has well over 70 names on it. And I guess for the sake of moving forward, I'll go ahead and move we accept it. But with the caveat, I want to get back to some of these people whose attendance I feel is lacking and find out from them if they're willing to continue serving, and if not, we'll make changes in the future. But to move things forward at this point, with that caveat, I'll move for approval of the reappointment listing.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'll second that, and I think probably the most efficient way to handle this, Commissioner, would be the commission liaison, kind of give a report back to the committees about the attendance and some of the ideas whenever they're there at their commission or at the committee meeting about some ideas as far as either to improve attendance or to remove those that are not attending properly. That'll be the most efficient way. That way each one of us have about 15. We can get it done.
Okay.
And I'd like to add, too, I'd like to see it change a little bit. If you have an excused absence, I think it ought to be something serious.
Like a vacation?
If it's consistent. No. The bottom line is that if they're ill or it's a one-time thing, but when it's repeated, I think if it's repeated, then they should resign.
Does our county administrator have anything to add?
Well, it's basically the decision of the board. We could write letters, just saying that, attendance is important, and you can come up with a policy. What is an excused absence? Right now, if someone calls in, according to your policy, it's considered excused. So it's up to the board to set that policy, and whatever they set, we can monitor. And if you'd like, we can send a nice letter saying, it's important that you attend and maybe encourage
I'd rather
attendance.
save paper and stamps, and we have chair people of these committees. Let them take ownership and responsibility of these committees because they are in advisory capacity, and then as the commission we should report that back. Let's let them exercise their leadership, and I'm sure if there's some issues there, we could let them know we'd like to have that taken care of, and they will step up to the plate. Yep.
Do I have a motion?
I did
Yes.
move to. Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes, thank you. Kay,
Madam Chairman, this involves acquisition.
could we read the, yes, you were, sorry.
Acquisition of right-of-way along 66th Avenue. It's a proposal to have an expedited process to acquire right-of-way, and one attorney represents about 40 or 50 landowners along 66th Avenue, and rather than going through the eminent domain process, he has discussed with our office a process whereby we would mutually select an appraiser. The appraiser would come in with appraised value. There would be a contract up front to agree to close at whatever the appraiser's appraised value was, plus a 7 to 10% fee for the attorney, which would be similar to a real estate commission. And there'll also be some engineering fees to the county in terms of staking out the property that's being acquired for right-of-way. At the department head meeting yesterday, there seemed to be some reservation among the staff about using this approach, so I just wanted them to be able to voice their concerns. And Mr. DeBrawl has been working with Raymer McGuire, who's representing these 40 or 50 landowners, and maybe he can help with the discussion.
I'm concerned, what we're concerned, this encourages these attorneys to do this, and that's pretty high commission. The real estate commission, 7 to 10, is usually shared with the broker and the agent. This encourages people to come in and get a bunch. Anytime we're getting right away to pull them together, it's kind of the, the rooster in the hen house type situation to me. And also if they pick the appraiser, we'd like as a staff to be very involved, because we know what appraisers we think do a good job.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Baird. Bill DeBrawl on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. The appraiser that's been used in these three is an MIA appraiser who's got past experience with the county. She served as a special master to the Value Adjustment Board 2 years ago, and she's well respected in her field. I checked her credentials with other attorneys, outside counsel that are assisting us on other cases, and she doesn't seem to favor one side or the other. So I have confidence in her capabilities and in her appraisal reputation. The other issue, as far as the attorney's fees, the Commission should know that in an eminent domain case, the condemning authority must pay the attorney's fees. It can be worked on a sliding scale. It can be worked on an hourly basis. It can be a variety of different things. But for the condemning authority, we pick up the costs of the appraisal. We pick up the cost of any engineering fees. We pick up the cost of the attorney's fees as well. That's set by statute, and there's really nothing that we can do about it. In one of the cases, the Dowling case, the appraisal came in just yesterday at $40,000. What the Commission has done in the past when we get an appraisal in is that the Commission has gone ahead and authorized an increase above the appraisal price of 10 to 15%. In this case, with the Dowling matter, the 15% on top of the $40,000 appraisal would have arrived at a price of $46,000, plus the appraisal plus the appraisal fee would have driven it even higher. In the Dowling case, the work that I did, or the work that we're going to pay for here, is a $4,000 attorney fee, a $3,000 appraisal fee, coming to $7,000. So we're looking at either $47,000 to purchase this property using the method that Mr. McGuire and I have negotiated, or probably $47,000, $48,000 as we have done in the past when we've added and gone up from the appraisal. So, you know, I guess we look at it as an efficient method of trying to acquire the right-of-way on an expedited basis. In the future, what we're going to do now, and with the Commission's authorization, is once we get enough appraisals in to get a good representative value of the property that's out there, we'll be able to simply negotiate very quickly the purchase price for bare land and proceed in a more rapid basis. Any questions?
Yep. Bill, I had a question about who the appraiser is going to be, because in our backup it says a Mr. Robert Babcock.
Correct.
And then you referred to it, somebody as a she was doing this.
Camille Smith. She works in his office.
Okay.
Both are MIA appraisers.
I don't think that we're questioning the competency at all. I think we're questioning cost.
I understand.
I think that maybe we need to negotiate that a little stronger and, you know, not take the top end, because we don't know what's going to happen January, what is it, 29th or whatever, and the rest of the year. So I think, you know, just a given 7 to 10% is pretty high these days.
You know, we kind of, you know, as I understand this and looking at this over a period of time, you know, we're kind of at their mercy. I mean, regardless of where they are, as long as it's less than going to court, and I'm not trying to defend the appraiser, because I think these fees are very high, but I think they're very high because we're very vulnerable and the way the system's set up. And, you know, we're looking at what I've been told, I guess, over a 30% on the average over and above appraised value when you go to court, because you got to pay their fees, our fees, and everything else. So we're just in a real vulnerable position. I thought the fees we paid a couple of weeks ago for some property was rather high, but I don't know what we can do about it. Is there a solution?
Aside from changing the law or maybe trying to negotiate some of the figures down, I don't think so, and you're correct. The law has set us in a very vulnerable position and exposes us to the cost. If we would proceed in eminent domain, not only would we have our attorney's fees that we'd have to take care of, we'd be responsible for the other sides, right. Our appraisal, our engineering, their engineering.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Perhaps a prudent way to move forward with this is to try it out. I think that cap it at these 3. We've got 3 of them here in front of us. See how the process works. If the process works well enough that it pleases our county administrator, let him come back with a recommendation as far as to continue. This may be a good thing, it may be a bad thing, but until we give it the opportunity to see if it can work for us.
Yeah, I got to say, I think the fee's too high, but that's me. And I also think that...
What should the fee be?
I just think we think as a staff, it's a little high. So.
What do you, I mean, help me with it. I mean, because we can amend this right now and send it back to them.
Yes. Go ahead. Mr. Zito.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Michael Zito, Assistant County Administrator. I suppose the inquiry here is with respect to the windfall for the attorney. He's convinced a whole group of people to take a appraised value. The county, in good faith, will offer that to any property owner who will. That's the process. So I'd rather give the 7% to the landowner.
Mr. Zito, that's not the process. The process is in eminent domain. They have a right to be represented by an attorney, and we have the obligation to pay their fees. When they do retain an attorney, we can't deal with them directly. We can't say, here's our appraisal, please take it or leave it. If they come to us and we mutually select an agreed upon appraiser, we have 1 appraisal fee, not 2, and that's the process. They have an entitlement under the law to be represented, and we can't circumvent the fact that they've retained an attorney. And I think if we can limit the cost to 1 appraisal instead of 2, and we can limit the attorney's fees to 7 to 10% of the appraised costs instead of 25% perhaps of the benefit they obtain in an eminent domain action, that we're really having a more efficient approach to this.
And I don't disagree with that, Will. I just want the public to understand that they can, with or without an attorney, they can discuss the proper and just value for the acquisition directly with the county, and that we don't need to pay an attorney 7% of the agreed upon value, when we can certainly offer that to the property owner directly. That's the public policy message I want to give. Of course, on an individual basis, when someone's represented by counsel, we're going to take every precaution and courtesy and follow the law and go through the process. But in this particular case, we're paying 7% to an attorney, and he's negotiated appraised value. Well, let it be known today and for the future that we will offer appraised value, and in certain cases up to 10% above. That's the message I want to send to the public. But of course, in these particular cases, we're already in the process with representation. So just let it be known.
Thank you. Yeah.
Question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner.
No, I'm in charge. You can go ahead.
Sorry.
Certainly are.
Madam Chair. I thought Commissioner Wheeler was going to speak, and I was going to let him speak.
He'd already started.
I said, Madam Chair.
Right, but he'd already started, and I've already called on him.
That's fine.
You're
You're in charge.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
I would be happy to bring a report back to the board or to Mr. Baird, whatever the will of the commission would be, based on these three files that we've selected.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Now I forgot.
No, you didn't.
I'll come back to you.
No, what I was going to say is, would it be possible or ethical, I guess, well, if based on what Mr. Zito's saying, is the properties that we need to evaluate, appraise, and buy, to send them all a letter telling them exactly what we're willing to do.
We should do that already.
And I mean, you know, with the 10% above appraisal, whatever you do, I mean, I don't know which is better. You know, if the attorneys get involved, it may be more, but I'm just saying to let them know that they've got an option. They've got the option over here by hiring an attorney, or they got the option in dealing with us, and they know where we're at.
I think the message we want to send, we offer their appraised value to anyone when we have to take their property. They don't necessarily need, you know, to get litigation drive up the cost, because we're going to offer, and they're going to end up with appraised value. That's what, they're no further ahead, and that's right. What that's the message we always do offer appraised value.
Madam Chair. I'm just thinking that if the letter that went out to everybody that we're going to be talking about their property just was clear, said here are your two options, bullet one, bullet two, and let them decide. So they know in advance, and they're not kind of floating around out there wondering what they should do.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Miller, many times we have engineering meetings to along the way as the road is designed, and attorneys will come to these meetings, and I can't use the term solicit because it's not, it's an unethical violation according to the rules regulating the Florida bar.
Why do they all advertise on television then?
Well, that's an approved advertisement under the rules of Florida Bar. But
there was mass mailings sent out to residents along the county roads.
Yes.
And there are ways to have your methods approved through the Florida Bar, and I'm not suggesting that anyone's circumvented those rules in these cases. However, I've attended engineering meetings where attorneys will attend and gather the masses and represent them. My point is that the county will always offer appraised value. We represent the public as well as a whole, and it's our goal to pay a fair market value for these acquisitions. And in many cases, because of the risks and uncertainties of litigation, we will offer up to 10 or even we've gone to 15% above appraisal. So certainly the law invites the property owner to be represented by counsel, and we encourage that. However, I want it to be known that any property owner who that owns property along right-of-way that we need can come into Indian River County, and they can negotiate appraised value and up to 10% depending on certain factors that we can discuss with them. So they don't need an attorney to get appraised value. They just don't need it. So I'd rather give the 10% to the citizens.
I've got a question. How do we determine whether the fee will be 7, 7.5, 9.9, or 10%? It just says 7 to 10%.
7% with a residential setting, a house involved. 10% if it would be just bare land.
And who came up with that calculation?
Attorneys.
Well,
Yes, it
well,
was
let's-
negotiated.
For the record.
He's right, it was a negotiated fee.
What would happen in the event that we went this route and then without us agreeing to actually, we've agreed to enter into this with this attorney was representing the client, and then negotiations went south, then they went to through the eminent domain process. If I'm not mistaken, at that time, there would still be a commission due to the attorney of 7 to 10%, depending on the structure on that, and it would not void any contract that was in place in advance of the litigation.
It could be more. In attorney's fees in an eminent domain suit, it's based on a percentage of the gain the attorney achieved for the client. So if the county were to offer $100,000 to purchase a property and a 12-member jury would decide that it should have been $200,000 would set the fair market value of the property, the attorney's fee is 1/3 of that amount, or $33,000, plus the costs.
And how often do we go to eminent domain? We don't.
It's not very often, but in the past, I think the county has encountered Mr. Legwin's property in eminent domain and also acquired some property for the Indian River Boulevard extension in eminent domain.
I think the Legwin property, the attorney's fees were about $62,000 for his attorney, plus the appraisal fees for us, for them, plus updates of the appraisals. You have to have a fresh appraisal when you go to court. You can't have one that's more than 4 or 5 months stale. So you're looking at iterative appraisals. And when you have appraisals that require testimony of the appraiser at court, which is quite detailed, then you have the hourly fees of the appraisers to testify on top of their actual appraisal costs. So we think that this is eliminating several appraisals by agreeing to one appraisal, just having the parties select the appraiser up front, and whatever he says, that's what we close at, plus the negotiated attorney's fee, 7 to 10% of whatever's the appraised value.
And the other thing that I think that this process will do is save staff time. If we're not bogging down our engineers and our land acquisition people in the negotiation process, we've got an attorney that's basically doing that legwork for us. And all we have to do is iron out the agreement, dot the I's and cross the T's, and we can proceed in an efficient manner. And like Mr. Wheeler said, this is probably making the least bad of a bad situation where we're going to get hit sooner or later.
Madam Chairman, the Administrator's office doesn't disagree with that. It's just that we want to just send a public policy message out there that our doors are open. And if you feel comfortable enough, it's our ethical obligation to advise every property owner that they have the right to counsel, and we will do that. But if you're willing to take appraised value, you can walk right through those front doors, and we will make that happen, and in some cases even above appraised value.
Well, in the process, have we sent a letter out stating that?
Yeah. In most cases, we're going to pay. I don't want to say we're going to pay above appraised value. That's not in the best interest of the public's money. We will pay appraised value.
Right.
Correct.
Gentlemen, what is your pleasure?
Well, Madam Chair, I guess my knowledge of the real estate fees is usually that commission is split between a listing agent and the selling agent and divvied up. And it seems to me pretty excessive. He's getting 7 to 10% for just getting appraised value. I don't think our citizens got much of a bargain there. I do understand your point about the efficiencies and things like that, but I'd make a motion that we move forward with this, but reduce the fees to 3.5% to 5%, which would be a normal split on a real estate commission.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? I'd like to, since I can't make a motion, but suggest to you that perhaps, as Mr. Davis had said, we look at this these three.
Just these.
And then evaluate, but come down to your suggestion.
Yeah.
And
Well, as I said in the beginning, this attorney represents 40 or 50 property owners, and these three are sort of a test to see if we do think the process is efficient. And we can certainly go back on the remaining 47 parcels, or however many are out there, and negotiate a reduced fee with him, especially if the process seems to be working and it's smooth and everybody's happy with the appraiser. There's less work involved for him going forward. So it may be possible to negotiate a better fee.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown, I think what Commissioner Bowden is saying is basically, let's test these three out. Let's do it at the 3.5% to 5% respectively, and then let's come back and evaluate this and see if this is in the best interest of the public.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we will look at this.
Yeah.
This isn't a blanket thing for all 47,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I understand.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
question of Mr. DePrawl.
Yes, sir.
Is there any incentive that you're aware of that may have an attorney reduced from 3.5 to 5? I agree with the motion, but I mean, is there any incentive for them to do that other than, I mean,
The rest of the work.
No. I mean, as far as my workings with Mr. McGuire on this matter, he seems to be very attentive to his clients. He puts in a great deal of time. He makes frequent visits here. His staff is very responsive. I received probably the worst news that I could have last week when his legal assistant said that my number here at the county was on their speed dial. And so that's the degree of work that their firm is putting in. If I thought that the 7 to 10% was an excessive fee, I would say so. But in this case, my feeling is that on the Dowling matter, where it's going to be a $4,000 fee, I don't think that's an excessive attorney's fee. Given the fact that the eminent domain field is so specialized, and that if we try and work out an hourly fee, I wouldn't be surprised at all if you'd be looking at a $400 per hour attorney fee.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Brien's motion didn't mess with the $4,000 fee. It just was the upside. In addition to that, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, that's clearly what I thought. And when you read this, you talk about McGuire in here, and when we were paying for the appraisal fee, the engineering fee, we're paying for the attorney's fee, but where it really gets, I think, it starts to affect substantially this board, I think, or at least me, is whenever you have the opportunity to jump up to 7 to 10%. And I think that to capping that at 3.5 to 5%, respectively, is very appropriate, especially still keeping in mind that the attorney's fees are still going to be $4,000 at a minimum if they are the one that represents the client on this, on any of this action.
Very well. I understand.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
And we have one final P.
Yes, ma'am. This is the Wabasso Beach Park Restoration Project, and staff is in the contract, the bid contract. They're proposing that not only is there a liquidation damage penalties for failure to complete on time, but a fairly substantial bonus for coming in a little bit early. And I guess my question on this is the way I look at this is this isn't going to start until March or April, and it won't be complete until after the summer season. So I don't see the need to give a bonus if we're not going to have it open by summertime for the park. So I'm just wondering if we're just throwing something out there, we're going to be giving away money that isn't going to help us get that thing open by, say, June. I mean, if you could say, hey, we got something here that will give that thing open by June and the park can be available all summer, I'd say sure. But if it's not going to be done until September, October, I think we're throwing away county money at that point.
Jim Davis, Public Works Director. I can't argue the point that certainly the park won't be open by summer, but this park has been pretty much in very bad shape since Hurricane Jean and Francis in 2004. And there is a tremendous demand, even in September, October, for the park. And there has been discussion about giving our contractors incentives to finish the work early. Florida DOT does that routinely on their contracts. There is a cost savings to the county in that our inspectors don't have to be on the job that long of a period. The earlier you can finish the job, usually the better. It gets the punch lists completed earlier. So this is just something that, even though this is for Waubasa Beach Park, this is something we were looking at doing in all of our future contracts to some degree where it makes sense. But we just proposed it on this particular contract due to the fact that there has been such an outcry from the public to get Waubasa Beach Park back open.
I've received a lot of criticism because that park's been closed ever since the hurricane, and it's due to a lot of issues of, placing the bathrooms and the control line, and so we were just trying to encourage it to get it done so that because we've had a lot of the public inquiring why we haven't been able to get that park up and running. It was kind of just an incentive. Hopefully we'd get it done sooner.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I have a bit of a problem, as Peter does with this. I think that, if I'm going to bid a job and I think it's going to take me 6 months, maybe I'll tell you it's going to take me 7 months so I can get a 30-day bonus. I think we're opening up a situation where, if we're going to do this more frequently, I think we're opening up an end product that encourages them to bid over a longer period of time just so they can get a bonus. I'd rather shorten it by 30 days when we negotiate with them and add the penalty to them. So if they don't finish earlier, then they pay us, as you've done in here. But I just think we're opening up a situation where, it's almost like getting into tipping, and they get a lot of money for the work they do. It's not that any of these people we work with are inexpensive.
And I guess my other concern here too is we're kind of giving a double bonus, $500 a day for substantial completion, and then $200 a day for the 30-day punch list. So I'm thinking, well, I'm going to say I'm done 30 days early and get the $500 a day, and then I'll take those 30 days and do the punch list and give up the $200, so I'm still making an extra $300 a day for being on time. You see what I'm saying? So what I would propose here is not to have the bonus for the substantial completion date, but I will go with the $200 per day completion for the punch list to have that done ahead of time.
Is that a motion?
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
I second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Thank you very much. And that's the consent agenda. Public items, public hearings, and our first one is legislative. Consideration of proposed amendments to Chapter 973, Public Nuisance for Weed Maintenance Regulations and Nuisance Abatement Process. Memorandum dated December 14, 2007, 261 to 295.
Good morning. I'm Stan Bowling, Planning Director.
Good morning.
This particular item is a change to the Land Development Regulations, Chapter 973, that's public nuisances. And actually, this board directed staff to initiate changes to this chapter, and there were two particular cases that brought this to the board's attention and the need to change Chapter 973. One is an egregious code violation in Vero Lake Estates. It's gone all the way through the conventional code enforcement process, including fines, but there's still no action to comply and correct the violations. And the other issue is with respect to weed height problems in Vista Gardens and Vista Royale, an unplatted multifamily project. This is a picture of the Vero Lake Estates example, and there are numerous types of violations that's shown in this photograph. Again, gone all the way through the existing process, but no abatement of the nuisance. And this is one of many photographs we have of Vista Royale, Vista Gardens area, and some of the weed maintenance problems that were more pressing earlier this year, or in 2007. The process that we've gone through, we had a public workshop in October, and several commissioners actually attended that. Professional Services Advisory Committee and Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing, and now the hearing this morning. You all can take action and adopt these changes if you so choose. The PSAC and the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as staff, recommend adoption of the proposed ordinance. There are two sections to the ordinance. One is with respect to weed maintenance specifically, and the other is an abating nuisances process. The one would address the types of issues we had with the Vista Royale and Vista Gardens issue. The other, we have egregious violations like Vero Lake Estates, one that I showed earlier. Our definition of weeds is essentially excludes natural vegetation and understory vegetation, but is meant to be to target untended, dead or living grass or grass-like vegetation. And an accumulation of excessive weeds is found in our ordinance to constitute a public nuisance based on health, safety, and welfare. The current criteria that we have in our code is untended weeds in excess of 18 inches in height are constitute a nuisance if they're located in a platted subdivision that's 50% built out. There are exemptions for agriculturally zoned land and conservation land and natural vegetation on uncleared lots. And the history of this existing regulations has worked for years, and it was really designed to address single-family lots in developed areas. The recent problem that was illustrated with Vista Gardens and Vista Royale is that they're not covered with those weed maintenance regulations. Even though they're a multifamily development, they're not platted. And the proposed change would apply the same weed maintenance regulations to multifamily projects like Vista as is applied to single-family subdivisions. We surveyed many other local governments. None had specific golf course regulations. We were just looking at what would constitute a nuisance. We looked at various municipalities and counties, and I'd just say for counties, there tended to be either a 12-inch height or an 18-inch height constituted a nuisance. There are different ways of measuring that and different areas that would apply. I won't go through all of these, but that's generally what we found. Staff looked to have a quantifiable standard. That's why we are proposing in this ordinance to stay with a specific height for weeds. We think the height needs to be high enough to constitute a hazard, and we want to address the entire site and the entire lot, not just strips around the perimeter. We also looked at the long growing season we have here and recognizing, the enforcement aspects. And so essentially what staff has come up with is a 12-inch, lowering the height from 18 inches to 12 inches, that constitutes a nuisance, and that's justifiable. And to apply to multifamily developments the same as single-family developments where they're 50% built out with units. The other section of the code deals with abatement provisions, and I'll just give a brief background, and I'll turn it over to Assistant County Attorney George Glenn. Just the compliance process in general starts informally and gets more and more formal as someone goes through the process. The first is an observation of a violation or a complaint is received. There's an inspection. The code officer contacts the property owner and tells them of a violation and gives them a time frame to comply. And most cases actually get into compliance this way, the majority of them. It's that initial contact. If compliance doesn't happen, then we just proceed through the rest of the steps that I have listed here. Formal notice of the violation, then an actual appearance to the Code Enforcement Board, an evidentiary hearing before the Code Enforcement Board, then a compliance hearing, a finding, a fine set, a lien can be filed. And at any point in this process, if someone comes into compliance, the process doesn't need to proceed. But if we get all the way to the lien file, there still may not be any abatement action. And I'm going to turn it over to George Glenn to go through the abatement portion of the ordinance that's proposed.
Good morning, George.
Good morning. Thank you. Commissioners, as Stan identified, there are several egregious violations to the code, or county codes. And the problem is that the existing 973 ordinance calls for two options to abate nuisances. The first option is the standard Code Enforcement Board procedures. That is where we send most of our violations. If there's a violation of the code, it goes in front of the Code Enforcement Board. Stan laid out the procedures for which the Code Enforcement Board will try to bring the violator into compliance. And this is almost the exclusive method used by the county to abate the nuisance process. If a violator does not come into compliance, a fine is set to run against the real property, at which time it should become a lien against the real property. Historically, this has provided for a very good track record of bringing violators into compliance. There is actually an existing second option in the current 973 ordinances, which does actually call for the nuisance being brought to the code, brought to the Board of County Commissioners, and the Board of County Commissioners may direct staff to abate the nuisance if the violator does not come into compliance. The problem is that the way the current 973 regulations are written, it provides that if you select one remedy under this section, it precludes the enforcement of the other remedy. And since we go to Code Enforcement Board pretty much exclusively, we are never able to get to the point where the county can go and abate the nuisance. So we're proposing to adjust the 973, to change the 973 ordinance that will basically streamline the process. There will be only one option. Whenever a county code inspector determines that a public nuisance is found to exist, the inspector shall have the authority to serve the violator with a notice to impair before the Code Enforcement Board, and they shall hold hearings in the manner provided in Chapter 162, which is pretty much what we've already done, what we're continuing to do. Once it's in front of the Code Enforcement Board, the normal procedures will continue. However, we'll add an additional step. If the Code Enforcement Board determines that a serious threat to public health, safety, and welfare, or if the violation is irreparable or irreversible in nature, then the Code Enforcement Board may direct staff to bring that violation to the county commissioners, and the county commission may have the power to direct the county administrator to abate the nuisance. So this is the difference. Before, under the current existing 973 ordinance, you either go to the Code Enforcement Board, and the Code Enforcement Board runs their procedures, their hearings, sets a fine if there's not compliance, and it becomes a lien against real property. However, if we go through that process, we are precluded from having the county commission direct the county administrator to abate the nuisance. It's an either-or situation. The idea is to streamline the process so that everything automatically goes to the Code Enforcement Board. Once it goes to the Code Enforcement Board, they run through the normal procedures. They still will issue a fine if there's non-compliance. However, the additional step comes in if they determine that the violation is a serious threat to health, public safety, and welfare. This is a heightened standard. Then they may direct staff to bring it to the county commissioners, and the county commissioners may then direct the county administrator to authorize county agents to abate the nuisance, basically to clean up the problem. Once the county has abated a specific nuisance under this section, no further Code Enforcement Board determination is needed. So the problem that might come in is, okay, well, we go through the process, we go to the Code Enforcement Board, the Code Enforcement Board finds that there is a violation, that the violation is a serious threat to health, safety, and welfare, and then they send it to the county commissioners. County commissioners decide, yes, this is a serious problem, we need to abate the nuisance, we need to authorize county agents to clean up the property. The question then becomes, well, what happens if it comes back into a non-compliance? What happens if it reappears itself as being a serious threat to health, safety, welfare? So we have to go all the way back to the Code Enforcement Board and run through all the hearings, all the processes to get back to the county commissioners. And the answer is no. We have the section currently drafted that would say once a finding of a nuisance exists, once the Code Enforcement Board has made their heightened finding that a serious threat exists, and it comes to the county commissioners, once they abate, if the same problem arises again, the county commissioners can again direct the county administrator to abate again. We do not need to run through the entire process again and again.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Would that to run through that process again require the 30-day trigger also to go back through it a second time?
No. Once the 30-day trigger, if from going from Code Enforcement Board to the county to the county commissioners, is basically to give the applicant a chance to appeal the Code Enforcement Board's determination. Once the Code Enforcement Board's determination is already found, then the 30-day period is not needed thereafter.
Does it go from the county commission to the Code Enforcement Board, or from the Code Enforcement Board to the county commission?
In the first process, it goes from Code Enforcement Board to county commission. Code Enforcement Board makes the finding that there's a nuisance. That the second finding is this nuisance a serious threat to health, safety, and welfare, enough to the point where we should send it over to the county commissioners and to see if they would like to abate the nuisance. If that second finding is made, it comes to the county commissioners, and the county commissioners may then decide whether they would like to direct staff to abate the nuisance. But it's a permissive; it's not a requirement. So there's no mandatory that the county have to go out and abate any existing nuisance.
It's a judgment call.
And the reason why it's a judgment call is it's not. We do not feel it's a good policy decision to have another board be able to direct the county commissioners, require you to spend money. We understand that this is going to be a tight year budget, and the next few years might be tight years. And some of these nuisances might be quite expensive to abate. And so it's a good idea, we felt, to allow the county commissioners to weigh the benefits of abating the nuisance versus the cost to abate. We didn't feel it was appropriate to have any other agency mandate that you spend money to abate a nuisance. It was important to reaffirm in the updated in the proposed 973 changes that the idea is that we still use the code enforcement board. That's still the primary method. The idea that we go ahead and lien the property, that should be the primary method of bringing violators into compliance. We don't want to get in a situation where we're changing the method, and now the way we're going to really have the stick and making sure people comply with our codes is that we're going to go and abate the nuisance for you. So the idea is that should really be an extraordinary remedy. In amending the current 973 ordinances, we went ahead and looked up Chapter 162, which deals with the local code enforcement boards. And the 162 states that if there's a question as far as, well, how do we come up with the standard of a serious threat to public health, safety, welfare, or the violation is irreparable or irreversible in nature, we've gotten that standard from actually Florida statutes. Florida statutes actually talks about the idea of county commissioners abating the nuisance, but it provides for the standard in the statute. So I basically just took the standard that exists in Florida statutes and put it into the existing county code. I felt that would alleviate any future concerns or challenges that we are somehow inconsistent with Florida statutes by basically just borrowing their standard. I've listed some concerns for your consideration. Does the county enter into the mowing business, debris removal business? I mean, there's certainly the possibility that if there is a finding that a serious threat to health, safety, welfare exists, and that the county should go ahead and abate the nuisance, how costly does this become? Are we going to basically have our crews start mowing private property to keep it low? Are we going to enter into the debris removal business? The second concern is how likely is the county going to recoup money spent to abate nuisances? Certainly, we can always lien the property. If there are higher encumbrances on the property, it makes it a lot more difficult to recoup money. If it's homestead, it makes it almost virtually impossible to recoup money. The third concern is we are proposing to impose a 12-inch height limit rather than an 18-inch height limit on weeds and grasses. And so the question is, does this create a greater burden for the county? Does it create a greater burden for the residents? The conclusion, I recommend that the Board of County Commissioners adopt a proposed ordinance that all code violations appear before the Code Enforcement Board. So take out this option of either going to Code Enforcement Board or the County Commissioners. Everything goes to Code Enforcement Board. You require a finding by the Code Enforcement Board that the violation presents a serious threat to health, safety, and welfare, or is irreparable or irreversible in nature. And then finally, you empower the Board of County Commissioners with the option, but not the requirement that the county abate the nuisance. And that's my presentation on the abatement procedures.
Thank you very much. Before I open the public hearing, Commissioner Wheeler, do you have anything of staff? Commissioner Davis? Commissioner O'Brien?
I just wanted to clarify, George, so if we take the Vero Lake Estates house, that was one of the triggering events of this, and we go through this process, Code Enforcement Board decides that there is a significant hazard to public health, safety, et cetera, then the Board of County Commission would vote whether we go in there and mow it down and clean it up.
Yes.
And then if 60 days later, Code Enforcement goes by there and says, hey, everything's grown back up again, it would come back directly to us to make that decision again whether we want to spend the money to mow it again.
Exactly.
Okay.
If it's the same violation that was found the same time, so if the violation was both junk, trash, and debris and overgrown weeds, and both those violations got sent to the county commissioners, then yes, you would not have to go back to the Code Enforcement Board.
Okay.
Commissioner Fletcher? Okay. Any further information from staff at this point? I'm going to open the public hearing, and this is how this works. We have two podiums, one on each side, and so we're delighted to hear from everyone. If you would collect your thoughts before you come to the podium and try not to be redundant, we would appreciate it, but we want to hear from you all who want to speak. So I now open the public hearing, and anyone who would like to speak to this issue, please come forward. State your name and address.
Good morning.
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 My name's Ray Batt. I live at 36 Vista Gardens Trail in Vero Beach. Never again. Never again should 5,000 residents of Vista Royale and Vista Gardens have to endure health and safety hazards where rodents and snakes creep up on our doorsteps on occasion because there's an extended habitat for those critters. Never again should 5,000 Vista residents have to endure a devastating decline in real estate values, largely because of the neglect of a golf course. Records in the property appraiser's office show that as much as $50 million in assessed value will come off the tax rolls this year. The records show that, on average, our 2 condos will go down in assessed value by $30,000. Our 1.5s by an average of $20,000, and our 1s by $15,000. That means that every taxpayer in Indian River County is going to have to dig a little deeper to make up the difference. And that's not fair. There seems to be 2 questions to be answered. First of all, is the amendment, does it go too far? And the answer is definitely not. Agricultural lands are exempt. Conservation and preservation lands are exempt. Land left in its natural state is exempt. Even lots that have never been cleared in a subdivision by the developer, they too are exempt. And our county horticulture agent tells us that in Indian River County, the common grasses don't grow much beyond 12 inches. And then the question is the amendment reasonable? And the answer is definitely yes. A study I did a couple of months ago of all the public nuisance codes in the state of Florida, there was astonishing results. It showed that of those municipalities that use a measurable standard, 144 prohibit weeds and grass in excess of 12 inches. Only 29 permit grass and weeds as high as 18 inches. That's overwhelming. 144 to 29. Even little Charlie Brown's baseball team doesn't lose by a score like that. So we have hope for the future. There's been some improvement. But even today, there are some areas that haven't seen a lawnmower in 9 months. And there are still some ponds that are clogged and preventing stormwater runoff. Even though the time to comply with the county ordinance has been extended from September 15th to October 22nd to December 21st. And so that's why it's most important that you adopt this amendment. There's a legend that's developed out of the hills and valleys of Tennessee. According to this legend, every year an old man would go down to a small village in the valley and he'd make predictions. And lo and behold, the predictions would come true. Well, this one year, a young boy decided to pull a prank. He wanted to trip up the old guy. And so he captured a small bird, and when the old man came, he pushed himself through the crowd, and he went up to the old philosopher and he said, "Tell me, old man, is this bird dead or is it alive?" Well, the old man thought for a moment, and he knew that if he said that the bird was dead, the young boy would open his hand and the bird would fly away. But if he said that the bird was alive, the young boy would crush it and it would fall to the ground. So the old man thought for a moment and he said, "Young man, the fate of that bird is in your hands. Commissioners, the fate of our quality of life is in your hands. Please, don't crush it."
Thank you.
God bless you.
Next. Thank you. We do have a policy here that we do not applaud because that takes more time. And I know that your manners will, you'll be just as gracious to anyone who speaks. Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? Please come to the podium.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Tom Long. I'm president of the board of directors of Vista Gardens. And let me preface my comments before I start by openly informing you I was a county commissioner in the state of New Jersey for 5 terms and 2 terms in the New Jersey legislature. So I'm very familiar with the process that you go through and your responsibilities related to that process. I don't have the expertise of Ray Batt from a legal perspective, but I have some human reactions, which I think you're vitally interested in also. The day each one of us put our hands on that Bible when we were elected officials, I think the bottom line was to represent the needs of their constituents. There are sometimes that we get detracted by vested interests, but the bottom line is still the needs of our constituents. And I think you represent that attitude as I evaluated your process this morning in dealing with probably one of the tackiest problems of eminent domain. You have a win-win situation here in terms of what an excellent committee headed by Ray Batt has done in bringing to your attention the needs of your constituents. And I think you will deal with that in a very positive and proper way. And again, I draw to your attention that hand on the Bible, what it meant. I think a lot of us are getting pretty tired now of the whole primary process. But I think change was an element now that both sides of the aisle have adopted. And I bring to your attention that there's no ordinance or no regulation that is not subject to review or change. And I think what's brought to your attention by some excellent people represents that in a very positive way. And I hope that you will have an unanimous decision in backing this particular change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next. Anyone else like to speak to this issue? Going once, going twice, seeing none. Public hearing is closed. Commissioners?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
First and foremost, I want to commend Mr. Ray Batt as well for bringing this forward and all of his input and collective thoughts for the group that he has represented, as well as Mr. Glenn and staff. I attended the workshop, and most certainly I believe all of the input that was delivered at that workshop was placed into a compact, enforceable, attainable document, and that the ordinance is fair and reasonable. In addition, I believe that the proposed changes will bring a quality of life that the citizens deserve, a quality of community. And those jurisdictions that have the 12-inch limit, most certainly you know those jurisdictions when you drive through them, as I have since this became a topic, and I'm prepared to make a motion to accept staff's recommendations to adopt this ordinance as it stands.
I second that, and I also want to compliment Mr. Batt. I've worked with him over this long haul and others, and it speaks well for your organization and the neighbors that you are to each other. You did see this through to the end, and I compliment you on that. Any other comments?
I'd just like to apologize. I'd like to apologize to everybody for it moving at the pace of government. It took forever for this to get to the point where it is, and of course this came about really by an issue in Vero Lake Estates. Is how I put it on the agenda. You look at that house in Vero Lake Estates. It had a washing machine out front in the middle of hurricane season. I can just imagine that blowing through somebody's window, and that's how it was brought to my attention. We were able to make better policy, and I certainly do appreciate the residents' input in this. And it's been a long time coming. We're not there yet. As you know, we still got a 30-day process, but something tells me you'll see to it that we hold their feet to the fire.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll take you're welcome to stay to the rest of the meeting, but we'll take a 5-minute break.
Or volunteer for a committee.
Imagine there's more people.
I'd like to call the meeting back to order, please. We have our second public hearing, Point West of Vero Beach Limited request to modify the approved plan development PD conceptual plan for Point West, memorandum dated December 28, 2007, 296 to 306. This is legislative. Staff?
This is a request to modify the conceptual PD plan and some of the parameters in the PD zoning district for the Point West project. It includes a conceptual plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission has recommended approval. Staff has reviewed it. It's also recommending approval, and this is now the final hearing for this particular request. Point West was approved in 1999, went through the PD process, set up a PD, Plan Development Zoning District, and they also went through the process again to make some revisions in 2003. It's a mixed-use development with residential, commercial, golf course, elementary school, and it's a traditional neighborhood design. This is a map showing the zoning of most of Point West. Actually, there's some that's a little bit to the south here, but in the striped area is the PD T&D zoning district that represents where Point West is located, with a main entrance off of State Road 60 here toward the top. Road coming through the project itself, 16th Street going east and west, left and right here, and then more of the residential and golf course, and then actually some equestrian homes further to the south. The particular request before you all this morning really affects just two areas. It doesn't affect any of the layout or the design. The commercial area off of State Road 60, again, a little bit off of the main entrance road to the project from State Road 60. There's a small block of commercial designated area here on the east side and on the west side as well. And then there are two blocks to the town center just north of 16th Street that's also would be affected by this request. And the proposed modifications are real simple and pretty focused. It's to increase the allowable commercial building area in the State Road 60 area and town center, and to decrease residential units. So there's essentially a swap, decreasing residential and increasing commercial in both their commercial areas. There are no changes to the setbacks or landscaping and buffering, dedications and improvements or traffic circulation. And there are no changes to the 2003 approval conditions. And I'll go over those conditions in just a moment, but they're meant to make sure that the commercial uses that are approved with this project are consistent with the traffic study or an updated traffic study, and to ensure that the town center commercial does not lag too far behind the State Road 60 commercial. Again, this is the approved layout, and there will be no changes with this proposal. It would just increase the commercial building area in two areas, State Road 60 area and the town center blocks, the two that are shown there. The Planning and Zoning Commission conducted a public hearing and recommended that you all approve the PD plan modifications with the conditions listed in staff's report, and that's staff's recommendation to you all too. The conditions that are recommended are just to set the maximums in accordance with the updated traffic study for commercial and office uses in State Road 60, and to also make sure that before the State Road 60 commercial proceeds too far, that the town center commercial is also developed to some extent. That's an important part of this overall project. And that's staff's recommendation, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioner O'Brien, do you have any questions for staff at this point?
Staying with the traffic circulation and such, I know we're kind of working through the 16th Street paving between 74th and 66th Avenue. I believe staff has spoken with the Point West folks about the alignment there. I'm trying to work something out there where we don't have to take someone's home to get that road paved and the right-of-way done. Does this affect that any at all, or can this move forward while we're still working on 16th Street, or do we need to wrap that in, or?
Right. Good question. I think this can move forward without getting into the specifics of that particular issue, because this does not increase the traffic intensity. It's not going to put a burden or bring forward impacts any more than what's out there now. There's no changes to the alignment or design right now. The 16th Street issue can get resolved on its own. I don't think this would have an impact on it one way or the other.
Commissioner Fletcher?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Davis? Commissioner Wheeler? Thank you. I'll now open the public hearing. Anybody on this side like to speak? The center? Anybody else? Okay. We'll close the public hearing.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Thank you unanimously. Number 3, consideration of proposed LDR amendments to Chapter 910, concurrency regulations and allowances for vesting concurrency, continued from meeting of December 11, 2007, memorandum dated December 27, 2007, pages 307 to 318. Yeah.
This is really a follow-up to a public hearing and a continuation of a public hearing from December 11th, when we came before you all last month with proposed changes to concurrency regulations. We presented 2 alternatives to you. The 2 alternatives were each very similar, except they were different in one respect, and one applied to all types of development, and the other applied to certain target type of development. Staff, the PSAC, the P&Z all recommended the first alternative, and there seemed to be a consensus among board members of dealing with that first alternative. So that's what we've come back to you all with in the ordinance that's before you presented in the packet today. The main purpose for the continuation of the hearing was discussion on a new provision that was proposed, and we discussed it quite a bit last month, and that's the permanent concurrency. The idea of that provision, again, it was a new sort of idea, was to allow owners of single-family lots who are not exempt, they're newer lots created after 1991, if they had a concern, an owner had a concern about single-family lots, he or she could come in, pay impact fees, and actually vest permanently for those lots. And I think the main concern expressed by the board was that might be a good idea for kind of what we might think of as the end user of a lot who will eventually build a house and live there. But it could also be used, as was pointed out, by developer or owner or builder of many, many lots. And what you all directed staff to do is work with the attorney's office and see, is there a way to limit that? If we had that permanent concurrency provision, is there a way to limit it, either by the, what kind of business enterprise a person was involved in, or number of lots that a person had under control, and that sort of thing. And the bottom line is, staff and the attorney's office looked at this, kicked around several ideas, and essentially decided that there's real difficulties in trying to make those distinctions with a provision like that. And the bottom line is, we decided that there's probably more difficulty trying to put that together and trying to arrange for that than the benefits of having that permanent concurrency provision in. If there's no permanent concurrency provision in the ordinance, and that's staff's recommendation to use not to have it in at this time, I do want to point out that there's still a 3-year concurrency option that's available. So rather than someone who has concerns, an individual owner, or someone has concerns about concurrency for a lot, they could still come in and get a 3-year concurrency, but not a permanent concurrency. And we felt that that was probably the best approach, given the kind of balancing the concerns that were expressed on December 11th. So staff's recommendation is for you all to approve the ordinance. It has no permanent concurrency provision in it, but it does have provisions for vesting up to 3 years, which an individual lot owner could take advantage of if he had a concern.
Any questions of staff at this point?
No.
Yes.
We're reducing this actually from 5 years to 3 years. So we're tightening it up. I like
yes, we
that.
are.
And I am a little regretful that we can't find a way to protect the individual end user, as you mentioned, but I also realize that opens a door that I don't want to see opened. So I think you've done a good job on this.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I agree. I mean, we have beat our heads up against the wall on this, the pending ordinance to 910 to what it is now. And now that things have slowed down, I think that this is good policy, something that we can live with. And I agree with Commissioner Wheeler. I really would like to see something, but I just don't see how practically we can get it to work in the fashion for the individual lot owner. So this is as good as it gets.
Commissioner O'Brien?
Yeah, Stan, when we had the permanent vesting back in there, were they required to pay all impact fees for that particular lot? Or are we
Yes,
just
and
talking about traffic?
that's the case with the provisions that are still in the code, and any that we proposed. You would always have to pay your impact fees to get vesting, and that's just a real fundamental principle that's still in the code and would be in anything that staff would propose.
Okay, so I guess I still don't see why, if somebody comes in and before they even get to this point, they've had to put money in for infrastructure, they have to bond out the 25% they haven't done, and if they're going to pay all their impact fees, school, parks, wastewater, land, the whole 9 yards, they're paying for that. It seems to me if somebody wants to come down here and buy a lot and retire here 10 years from now, there should be some way that they can be guaranteed they can build on that lot if all the impact fees are paid up front. I just don't see.
They can.
It is.
They can. I think the situation that we were trying to deal with is the already platted lots that didn't have the impact fees paid that an individual might buy. But if a developer pays all the impact fees to vest every lot in a subdivision, then those are vested going forward, well, for a certain period of years.
3 years.
Right, and I'm just saying if they're going to pay all the impact fees and we get that money and we're earning interest on it and we're sitting on that we should be able to reserve that right for them to be able to build on that lot. I mean, they've paid everything we've asked them, and then even if they come back 10 years from now, in my example, and impact fees have gone up, they got to still pay the difference, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so.
It's a sliding scale.
Well, I'm sort of leaning toward what you're saying, that why, Ken?
We went down this road before.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
The problem I see with this is for the sake of probably a very few, if any, and I agree with your intent, Peter, but for the sake of 1 or 2 people or maybe 5 people, that we're opening a door to get back in the same situation we're in now, except instead of it expiring in 5 years, a big developer could come in and be vested for eternity. And consequently, we're tying up capacity on the roads with, as they talk about, paper trips, ghost trips. WCI, for instance, is got 500 plus units up there. They paid all their impact fees. I think they got another year or so before it expires. That'll, I'm sure everybody's aware that money will stay in their account, and if they ever decide to build. But consequently, they've tied up all those trips on US 1 in that area, so nobody else can build because they're holding those, and they have no intentions of building. I mean, it looks like a desert up there. And I agree with what you're saying, and I wish there was a way to address that, but I think we're risking this much
For
to
that.
maybe save that much. In other words, as Charlie Sember would say, the juice ain't worth the squeeze.
And that's exactly, Madam Chair, that's where we were with this. I mean, we talked about this at the last meeting and tried to find some allowance for it, tried to make it so that we could limit it to one individual or to one lot. There's always a way around it, and unfortunately, the person that would find their way around it would not be the person that we're trying to protect. And
I just wanted to add too, but the people that do want to build, and as long as they're aware of it, I think, I'd love to see something that says that when somebody buys an individual lot, they're told they've got 3 years. And as long as, and just like a developer that comes in, I mean, they pretty much know where they're going to build 50 houses or 100 houses next year. And this will tighten that down where they're not going to buy up a lot of capacity just to hang on to it to keep their competition out of the picture.
And additionally, the fractional trips that one resident puts on a unit, the only way really we're going to, in my opinion, as a county, get to the point where an individual cannot pull a building permit because of concurrency is because we've had a developer step up and usurp all that concurrency and then push things over the limit. The fractional trips and the amount of concurrency for schools and water that one residential household puts on, I'm going to say 99.9% of the time we have taken care of that issue in advance before it gets to the point where it affects a single individual.
Do you want to weigh in, Commissioner Fletcher?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. O'Brien, anything else?
No, we can open the public hearing.
Okay.
When you're ready, because you're in charge, madam.
Okay, thank you. But I was just checking. Like to open the public hearing now. Anyone like to speak to this item? Please state your name and address for the record.
Looks familiar.
Yeah.
Who are you? I was here last night. Joseph Paladin. I'm the president of Black Swan Consulting. And I've been working on the pending ordinance in 910 with staff for the last couple of years. And I support what they brought forth. And, you know, times have changed in the last couple of years from where we brought forth the pending ordinance to protect ourselves and where we were before. And I think where we are now is even better than, you know, where we started. And before now, we didn't have prop share agreements a couple of years ago, which we have now. We didn't have de minimis, which we have now. It's almost virtually impossible for an individual to have a single lot and not be able to go forward in some way, shape, or form and build that house. But this does protect us for when things get busy again, that people can't come in and play concurrency like a chessboard. So I support what staff has brought forward, and I'm behind this 100%, and I'd ask you to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I close the public hearing. May I have a motion?
Move staff's recommendation.
Oh, wait a minute. Did I see somebody else? Jim, do you want us to talk? You can. I didn't completely close it. No.
Jim Granzy, 2364. What I'm thinking about is the Press Journal today has probably 90% ads in the paper. I think the agenda here today should be in the newspaper. The cost, I understand, is excessive, but like all the white hairs that you saw in here just recently, when you have 33 items on the agenda, I'll bet one or two of those were of interest to a lot of these people unknowingly. And you had a couple items on the agenda just recently. New fire trucks. You're not talking about $30,000, $50,000, $100,000. You're talking maybe $1 million. And I mention this, that people, particularly with the white hair, have no concept of the money that is being running through the county at this time. And it might help everybody to give. I mentioned when we first came here 25 years ago, breakfast, $5 for two of you, maybe $6. Well, it's nothing now for $15. And your expenses, I think, should be impressed upon the people in Indian River County.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I close the public hearing. May I have a motion?
Move approval.
And second.
Any further discussion?
Just, Madam Chair, I'd just like to weigh in here. When we first did this back in January or February, I voted against it because there's no provision for any type of vesting. I didn't think that was fair for large or small people to go forward with a project when we require so much investment in infrastructure and improvements. So this is an improvement over that, and I'm thankful to staff for bringing this back and going with it. I would still like to see some type of permanent vesting for those individual lot owners, but I realize that may be a challenge, so I will reluctantly support the motion, but it is better than where we were, I feel, but we'll keep looking at it, I guess.
Right, and I agree with you completely on that.
Yeah, Madam.
I agree with you in principle.
In principle, he is exactly right. But this has been for at least 2 years that I can think of that we've been going around in circles with this, and sometimes it's as good as it gets.
Right, this at the moment.
Yes.
Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Public discussion items. Request to speak from Dr. Stephen J. Farty, sorry, Senior, regarding petition from a board of City of Vero Beach for change in electric service provider. I had a senior moment there.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Dr. Stephen Faraday. I'm a resident of District 5. The purpose of my presentation is to provide data to support the need for county petitions related to correcting the lack of county or state controls over the City of Vero Beach utilities, and reducing the inordinately high rates and taxes imposed by the city utility on county residents. I prepared a report dated November 15th, which I distributed to the county commissioners and county staff, the 4 state legislators representing Indian River County, the city mayor, and the city manager. The following is a summary of the detailed report describing the high city rates and taxes paid for the city electric utilities by the county residents, and this affects each of the county commissioners' districts. You've got people receiving FPL and people receiving City of Vero Beach services in each of your districts. About 60% of the customers of the city electric utility are in the county. The city electric utility is not regulated by the Florida Public Service Commission for rates, fee structure, or territory like FPL is regulated. It has minor reporting requirements to the Public Service Commission, but if the Public Service Commission has an objection, it virtually cannot do anything about it. The city's charges for under 1,000 kilowatt hours are about 38% higher than Florida Power and Light's charges for the same amount of kilowatt hours used. The city's charges for 1,000 and above kilowatt hours are about 14% more than FPL for the same amount of kilowatt hours used. County residents pay a 6% county tax for FPL service, while county residents, such as myself, who have city electrical service, pay a total of 16% in taxes, 6% from the county, 10% from the city. A county resident using the city electrical service pays 48% more in taxes and electric charges than a county FPL customer for under 1,000 kilowatt hours, while a county resident using the city electric service pays 24% more if they have over 1,000 kilowatt hours. The average customer in the city of Vero Beach uses 1,100 kilowatt hours per month. A county FPL customer, and I have to note, this also includes county facilities. A county FPL customer using 1,100 kilowatt hours would pay $118 per month for that 1,100 kilowatt hours to FPL. If you were in the county and had the city providing the same service, you pay $174 a month, 118 versus 174. It's a big difference for the same amount of kilowatt hours. The contributions to the city's 2006 and 2007 budget from the city utilities totaled about 30% of the city's budget of $23.5 million. Thus, about 60% of the total $8.8 million contributed by the utilities, or 5.3% of the city's budget, is coming indirectly from the county residents. The city is not a producer of electricity. It's a broker or redistributor of electricity, buying it from other power producers and reselling it at a higher cost to its customer. Per the city, the power cost adjustment could increase again this month when the city's long-term fuel supplier contracts expire. The city claimed that the Florida Municipal Power Agency, to which it belonged for cheaper shared electric costs, had underpaid it for the power it had redistributed. The city paid over $3.1 million in legal, arbitration, and other costs to attempt to leave the Florida Municipal Power Authority, which will now occur in January 1, 2010. Per the city officials, it's likely that the new electrical supplier contract to be implemented in 2010 will result in even higher fees for the base charges, fuel adjustment charges, and monthly charges. The county voters do not have the opportunity to directly influence the imposition of major capital costs by city utilities, which not only affects the rates, but also capital costs related to proposals to move the water and sewer plant, to move the electric plant, to seek an alternative fuel supplier under the contract that will come up in 2010, to provide for replacing 4 of the generators, which were estimated 2 years ago to cost $80 million to replace, to pay off the $35 million liability that exists right now for the brand new generator number 5, or to determine the amount of the utility contributions to the budget. Should they go to the city budget, the county budget, or should it go to reduce the rates? The county customers of the city cannot purchase stock in the city electric utility. They can't vote for the electric utility board of directors, which is the city council. They can't speak as a voter in the city. They can't impact as a shareholder or a voter as to how the city should use the utility funds, or they can't file a complaint with the Florida Public Service Commission. If you were a shareholder of FPL and a customer, you could do all of those things. 3 other points need to be made that were not in the November 15th report. The first is that the Florida Public Service Commission has granted FPL authority to expand its St. Lucie nuclear electric power plant by the year 2012 to include an additional 200,000 households. There is capacity that will be available there. In addition, I've heard a few comments from people saying that, well, the city provided much better service than FPL during the hurricanes in 2004. When I probed further, I found that people were discussing articles that were in the newspapers that primarily referenced FPL's lack of service on the West Coast and in the rural parts of the center part of the state. When I probed further, it was not related to FPL's service in Indian River County. Both were felt to be good in terms of response. Finally, the county pays over $1.4 million a year to the city, including the 10% equalization fee for electrical service for its facilities. $1.4 million. Now, if you take 24% as being the reduction, that's about $350,000 a year the county could save by switching from the city to Florida Power and Light. Now, what I don't know in terms of that figure is what part relates to county facilities in the county and what part relates to county facilities in the city. But that's an awful lot of money that could be saved. The first petition is in 2 parts. It's to request the county board to petition the city for the city to approve within 90 calendar days from the date of the petition a request to switch the electrical service provided to Indian River County residents from the city of Vero Beach to Florida Power and Light. And the second part is to effect such a transfer, including Florida Public Service Commission approval and related transfers to FPL within 18 months thereafter. The time frames are important. There are 3 probable responses from the city. A positive response is unlikely because the city would lose 60% of its customers and would lose $5.3 million or 22% of its budget if those customers were allowed to transfer. However, that's under county jurisdiction. A negative response is unlikely also because this would provide exactly the response that's needed per my discussions with the state legislators for the legislators to invoke and to approve a petition to switch the city to the Florida Public Service Commission jurisdiction. What I would expect from the city is a delaying response to indicate that they can't respond right now, they have to look at it more, etc. When I had my discussions with the representative of the mayor and the city manager, the representative advised that my report was accurate. Therefore, the report should be valid for that type of decision. I can also see a possible delay because the city has not decided on the request for proposal that it issued about a year ago. That award of the contract was supposed to have been around July 31. It's not been awarded yet. The fact that the RFP is still on the street does not mean that the city could not agree to allowing the county customers to transfer, because the RFP has a range of services to be provided in terms of kilowatt hours. The second petition, if after the time period has expired, the expected negative or non-response from the city, the second petition would be a request from the county board to the state legislators to place the city electric utility under the jurisdiction of the Florida Public Service Commission, which would have the same authority over it as it does over FPL, and also to require that the city utilities, which are the electric, water, and sewer, be required to form a governmental corporation with an elected board representative of the jurisdiction of the customers served. The board, therefore, would be 60% county. This can be done under the Government Corporations or Interlocal Corporation Act of 1969, which is state statute 163.01. This is a unique issue in that it affects each of the commissioners' districts. It shows widely varying electrical costs for the same kilowatt hours within each of your districts. It affects the voters and non-voters. It also affects the county facilities, the businesses, and the snowbirds who cannot vote here but who have property here. I've had people come up to me and say, my condos for 6 months are costing me X dollar amount. They're paying 48% more than their neighbors across the street who are getting FPL service. It affects the county's own utility costs, which you should be interested in reducing. It involves utilities not answerable to any other authority in its state, nor to its customers. It represents taxation without representation. This is a critical election year issue. Support's being generated within the community with homeowner and condo associations, schools, clubs, businesses, and the press. I've agreed to write articles for the Press Journal on this issue. The city is also a member of the Florida Municipal Electric Association, which has 33 members representing 3 million customers in the state. The missions and goals of that our association are to have a democratic process for control of the citizens of the utilities. That has not occurred in the case of the city of Vero Beach, since 60% of the customers are outside of the city limits. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. You've done extensive work, and we're delighted to hear this report and see it. Any questions? Yes, we'll start at this end.
Okay. I just wonder, what was the response of the city council when you presented these numbers to them?
I met with the representative from the city who was representing the city manager and the city mayor, and he agreed with the accuracy of the report. He agreed with the numbers. There was minor differences due to rounding. We discussed a variety of issues in the report. Obviously, the city does not want to lose the revenue. Obviously, 60% of the people are in the county. There is a discussion going on right now as to the resolution of the request for proposal that's on the street right now. The numbers of competing bidders are being narrowed. There's no discussion of that. As county residents, we would have no impact on that, yet it's going to affect us in terms of the rates. We have no direction as to choosing that versus waiting for FPL's increased authority.
Well, has the city council seen this? I mean,
it's gone to the city. The city will have to answer.
So not the council.
Distributed. I know it's gone to the mayor, the city manager, and it's gone to the city customer service representative. I presume that they have distributed elsewhere within the city.
Okay. And second question, just curiosity, when you look at the 48%, because these things, I guess the rates change based on usage.
There's a 15% discount by Florida Power and Light for usage under 1,000 kilowatt hours.
Okay. And then also, when you're comparing cost per kilowatt hour and not all the taxes and franchise fees and stuff that are in there, you're just looking at cost per kilowatt hour.
There is a
when you're not just taking one bill, comparing it with another bill.
There's a non-fuel adjustment charge, which is based upon millage from FPL. There's also a fuel adjustment charge. Then there's also a monthly service charge. So there's 3 charges that constitute your bill. It isn't stated that way on your bill. So there are different rates that are charged by the city versus Florida Power and Light. For the under 1,000 kilowatt hours, there's a 15% discount in the total rates charged.
Okay, thank you.
If you have FPL versus the city.
Thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
That's a rather extensive report, and just learning a little bit about certain parts of the county. We actually have a piece of the county that's serviced by Peace River Electric Cooperative, the Blue Cypress out there. They have actually Peace River electricity coming across. I don't know what they're affected by, but that is a cooperative and is regulated by the Professional Services PSC committee, or excuse me, anyhow. What I'd like to note, of all the options that I think that you laid out, is the idea of some representation and for some regulation or some from another agency, just like every other electric cooperative or electric corporation is very appropriate, it seemed to me. Now, I know that there's probably some issues that I'm not seeing on the municipal side of it, but I'd certainly like to know more about this as we move forward, because I understand what you're talking about. I'm not a City of Vero Beach Utilities customer, electricity, FP&L services, and but it did take a long time for them to get to me after the hurricanes. Of course, I was only one house down 2 miles of dirt road, so I understand that. But
the major participants in the Florida Municipal Electric Association are authorities, which represent a geographical area as opposed to a government jurisdiction area. You have that in Jacksonville, Orlando, and you've also got it in Fort Pierce, which represents the city as well as a part of the St. Lucie County. So the Government Interlocal Corporation Act of 1969 provides the capability for having a government corporation that overlaps government jurisdictional boundaries. That would provide the capability for doing that. You would then have an elected board representative of the customers served. In that case, would be 60% county, 40% city. Now, whether there are arrangements that could be made to sell the facilities to that corporation from the city, that would be something that would have to be looked into. At the same time, I would have concern. I wouldn't want to have generators that are in their last stages of existence being sold to that authority for a high price, and then you're stuck with them. That would just be creating another problem.
Commissioner Flesher?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
O'Brien?
This is an issue because it came to my attention a year and a half ago when I was first running, and there are a lot of Indian River County residents that are paying this higher bill. One question I have is, how did this whole system kind of get started where we have the two different providers? Does anybody know the history of that?
It started in 1976 when the Florida Public Service Commission was established. There was a dividing line made at that time between the municipal facilities and the investor-owned facilities. That was requested by the Florida Public Service Commission. At that time, that's how you ended up with a crescent outside of the city proper, because that particular part of the area was urbanized and services were being provided by the city. The county at that point was relatively rural, was just starting its water and sewer services. The city already had that. In 1977 and 78, the city attempted to sell the city electric facility to Florida Power and Light. That got stopped by the U.S. Justice Department, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and the Florida Public Service Commission, because at that time, municipal utilities were regulated by PSC. They were deregulated in about 1980. So that's how the jurisdiction was derived back in 1976, a long time before the urbanization started in the county, and has really changed things significantly.
I wish you'd have done your research before you came here today.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Is there any other question I can answer?
Well, I guess really my question now falls back to our legal staff. I mean, or is there anybody here that could dispute what he's saying? And
I spent in December about an hour going over the materials and report that Dr. Faraday had put together, and I met with him for an hour subsequent to that. And I think his report is pretty true down the line. The issue is really how can this be resolved? The city itself could petition the Public Service Commission to resolve its territorial dispute, but I don't know that they have any dispute with FP&L. I'm not sure whether FP&L is interested in stepping into what might be a dispute between county customers and city customers, but I think he's properly laid out the options. Request the city itself to consider either divesting to FP&L or supporting legislation that might allow representation of the county customers through some governmental corporation under a interlocal agreement. I haven't gone with a fine-tooth comb over the Interlocal Agreement Act. It does seem to provide the power to do this. Whether there's something in there that would trip it up as a method to accomplish his goal, I can't really say, because I didn't want to put a lot of time into the research until the board gave some direction as to where they wanted to go or what they thought of his proposal.
Are you planning to go before the city council and give a presentation?
The last word was with the city for them to let me know if they wanted to meet. Mr. Gabbard indicated today that he wanted to meet, so see about that. At the same time, I still think we need to be moving on with how are we going to be reducing the rates for the county customers.
Madam Chair, to me, of all the options, is the one to get some representation, and exactly, I understand you laid it out of how we get there. That's just basically how we get there one-sided. I'd like to try to get there with both sides, because I think ultimately both sides are going to have to be involved in this process. I don't know which one of your options would help us get to that resolution the fastest?
It could voluntarily be done by the city and the county under that, if I understand the act correctly. I'm not an attorney, but I've been involved in legislation. If I understand it correctly, the city and the county could agree to establish such a corporation with the transfer of assets to that corporation and liabilities, and then let that be representative of the customers served. So it could be established for just the electric utility. It could be established for the water and sewer included in. Could all have got issues with regard to potential capital charges for moving the plants, for needs for upgrade of equipment, etc., which as a county customer, I just as soon not be tagged with that coming down the road. So I think the county and the city should try to agree on the establishment of an interlocal corporation, which would then in effect be an authority.
Right. Is there a way of us doing that without transferring assets? Because really, as a county, I don't have any desire to be in the electric business. What I do have a desire to do is help you with your situation and those county residents that are being affected by the difference in electric bills.
The easiest way of doing that is to see if the city will allow us to transfer. If not, then we have to go to the state. And that's a very clean-cut thing. No interlocal corporation has to be established. No transfer of assets. Just let us transfer out. It's a hard decision. I recognize the impact on the city. But at the same time, we're county residents. We did not cause that situation where there's that heavy reliance on the contributions from the city utilities.
Do we have anything from our county administrator?
Well, I think, and what has happened over the years is that because we're 60% of the electric customers, the amount that gets transferred from the electric enterprise fund into the city general fund, the amount that comes from county residents, I think, is actually more than the actual ad valorem taxes that they tax in the city. So there's a little bit of an inequity there, and I think that we have to look out for our residents, and as hard as it is, I mean, they're definitely paying more through the city.
The property values in our section of the county, the southern end of the island, south of the city line down to the Round Hill Park, the property taxes that we pay are $8.3 million a year, which is 14.5% of the county's budget. The city there was an article in the paper about 2 months ago indicating the city was interested in annexing a crescent around the existing city. If that picked us up, we would go. We would have a vote in the city, and you'd lose $8.3 million.
Yes, but your tax would go up considerably too, because our MSC millages, which you pay, is half of what the city's millage is to be in the city, so your taxes would go up considerably.
I looked at just the millage with regard to the ad valorem tax, and for a $500,000 house, the increase would be $42 just for that particular segment, based upon the millage provided by the property appraiser's office.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Chief, got anything you'd like to say?
Any openings in the police department?
Well, you notice I didn't put you on the hot spot. Who did?
I felt obligated to say something. So, Madam Chairman, thank you.
Yes.
Commission members. And thank you, Joe, for those kind words. Of course, Ms. Bowden is very familiar with what's going on with our electric system. And as most of you know, we were here about 18 months ago and gave a presentation, very detailed, on how the city's rates are structured, our relationship with FP&L, what the surcharge issues are and how they're distributed countywide by the city. And I think we're ready to do that today, but I don't think we want to get into that again. What I would suggest, Dr. Faraday has covered a lot of ground here today, and his presentation was very good, and I've read his presentation, and he does have some certain facts in there that are correct, but his interpretations of them are somewhat different than how we interpret them. We do have representation from the county. We do have a utilities commission that has members from the county on the board that are certainly, and I'm going to tell you, they are an independent group, and they are not afraid, like many of the advisory boards that you have. They're not afraid to give their opinion. They give us lots of input, and many of them are professionals from the electric field, and they are very helpful. And as you know, we are right now in the midst of exiting what we realize is a bad contract. It was signed in 1996. It's the All Requirements Project with FMPA, and we put ourselves at a disadvantage back in 96. In 2004, we recognized that there was a real problem. We went to arbitration. There was a provision in our contract to go to arbitration to contest what we felt was unfair treatment by a generating city. There are 5 generating cities and 15 non-generating cities in this All Requirements Project. And the generating cities have been poorly treated. And there's other cities that are generators are trying to get out as we are. They're just kind of watching us to see how this thing goes. But we are on the right path. We are 2 years away from getting out from under our contract with FMPA. If we wanted to sell the system, we couldn't because of our current contract. So we are very optimistic. We've had 10 companies that are actively trying to do business with us, and we feel like, and Dr. Faraday said that the rates are going to be higher. That's certainly not my opinion, and from the discussions I've had with these providers, we feel we're going to be very competitive with FP&L. We have an outstanding system. About 3 years ago, after the storms, we were in bad shape, not only from the storms, but just from other economic issues, primarily related to our relationship with FMPA. But we have tightened our belt. We've gotten some new professional help. We've got a new utility director that has vast experience in the utilities field. He has made some changes. We're on a roll now, and I believe we're going to have a system that everybody's going to be proud of. Our citizens are proud of our utility, not only our electric side, but the water and sewer and the transmission distribution side, as well as the generation. So I'll certainly be happy to talk to Dr. Faraday. I urge him to come to the Utilities Commission and make that presentation and let them discuss with him these issues. And then, if he feels the need, we'll certainly put him on the agenda. He can come and speak to the City Council. He may want to speak to them individually, and they will do that. So the offer I would make to you is that if you're inclined, we will come back at a later date, and you pick the time, and we'll give you a presentation on where we are, how we're situated, and what our anticipated outlook is for the future. And we think this is a difficult business to be in, and but we feel like we've got a tremendous community asset here, and we want to try to maintain that and to continue to provide the quality service to our customers that we do, whether they live in the city or outside the city. And one thing that we will do in 2010 is commission a rate study. And this is one of the issues that we need to really take a serious look at. We have talked about that doing now because there's obviously urgency on the part of many of our citizens. And kind of interesting, 5,000 residents down in Vista, I mean, they're our customers. And we've had a lot of interaction with them and done some things down there. And probably if they had realized, like Mr. Granzi said, if this was on the agenda, they might have stuck around a little bit. But we feel like that we're positioned to do some really good things. We'd be happy to come back to you if you want to give us a date and give you a really detailed report on where we are with our electric utility.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. This is a complex, it's not easy, it's complex, it's expensive, and it's risky. But I do think that it's an asset for this community if we can all get together and be able to live with the price that it's going to cost us all. And I think that's what you're really sort of talking about is equity and representation.
That's correct.
And I hear you saying that you're receptive to somewhat open-minded, but you have your bond.
It's not that simple. Just
right.
To say we want to give everything to FP&L,
right.
Reality doesn't allow that.
Right, I understand that completely.
A lot of things to go through if that was the will of the council. And again, the city council chose many years ago to be the utility authority, and they have the right to do that, and they are in effect the utility authority, with the advisory commission being our utility commission.
I would like to point out that the utility advisory committee in the city, there are allowed to be up to 4 members from the county. 3 have to be from the city. The county members on the city utility advisory committee do not vote for the city council members. The people that are on the county utility advisory committee vote for the county commissioners. So again, we're back to an issue of democratic representation, and it does not exist. So that's still one of the concerns, in addition to what the rates are. I understand, let's wait until 2010. Well, let's wait until 2012, until FPL gets its facilities up. Let's wait ad infinitum. This issue has been on the agenda. It was discussed before the board in August 2006. What was presented was the disparity of rates between city customers within the county and the city. No comparisons with FPL. That's what you've got here.
Yes.
And that's what's causing some angst in other areas.
Yes. Commissioner Davis?
Yes, and to me, it's not the issue is obviously the inequities. But if there are some bad decisions, I mean, we make bad decisions. That's not the issue. The issue is right now is who had a part of making those bad decisions and versus who's shouldering those decisions.
I think it's an issue of the facts have changed since 1976, 31 years ago.
Exactly.
That's a major change.
And I'm as far as giving the power plant to FP&L or having them take the customers or anything like that, to me, that's not the first step that should be taken. The first step that should be taken here is to try to get some kind of resolution here so that we can get some actual county residents involved in some of the decision-making process that means something, that actually have a voice. And when I say more so a voice, I'm not talking about a board that perhaps reports to a board. I think some kind of, if they have the opportunity to generate as much money as they're talking about and put it in certain areas of the city's budget, I think there should be some representation there. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but I really do understand the county's residents' plight and would really like to not walk away from here today with the thought that what we'll do is just come back and you'll give us the rate study and the information that we saw 6 months ago or 18 months ago.
And I'd hate to propose anything like having an independent commission, because that's a convenient way of burying something.
Yeah.
After 37 years in Washington, D.C., I'm fully aware of how things like this work.
Right.
But an independent commission made up of representatives from the city and county with an uneven number and a tie-breaking chair to look at the issue of the city and county utilities, because there could be a logical argument made to connect the city's water and sewer with the county and water sewer and have a regional water and sewer authority, and have that included under a city authority with regard to electricity. So it's an umbrella organization. Now, if there was a commission established with independent people, staff support from the city and the county, with a requirement from both sides that it must report back with a report in 90 days, that's something. That also gets it away from the issue of let's try to bury it by time taking its toll.
I like that. I think there's some validity.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I think there's some validity to what you're saying there, and it's going to be, it is uncomfortable, but I think we're going to have tax reform, in my opinion, on January 29th. I think as we look at that, we're going to start to see ways where we can consolidate areas where we can consolidate. I think in the future, we're going to be getting our water from the ocean. I don't think we'll be able to get it out of the aquifer or surface water. I think we're going to have to rely on some assets that the city has for the county to be able to get water from the ocean out to the other side of the St. Johns Marsh for drinking water. Everything that you're talking about has larger implications.
That's right.
But at the same time, we've got to take a small step in the right direction. And a small step in the right direction right now may not be to force this through a resolution like you're talking about, but to have this presentation go before the city council. And just, I would like to ask, or for you to ask them, would they like to proceed? And I don't mean that in a bad way. Basically, here's your poison. Which direction would you like to take it? Because it's not going to be pleasant, I don't think. But at the same time, what you're going through is not pleasant either. And I'd like to see us take some small steps forward into to resolving this issue, if at all possible. And I really do think that it's not to undo what's done as much as just to give representation to who it's being done to.
Well, I think if I go before the city council, it's almost like sending David before Goliath with a chance of losing, too. I think there needs to be some indications the county is supportive of
I think that's why he's here.
Yeah, well, and I agree. I am. I can't speak for the other board, but I understand your plight. I don't understand the ramifications of your plight, and that's what concerns me about taking such a bold step forward. I'm not having any city council experience with Vero Beach. I'm sure there's some large issues that I need to be made aware of, but I do understand your plight, and I don't know how to move forward from here.
We have the budget director here. Jason, do you have anything to add, please?
I just wanted to mention something that's a tangential issue that was mentioned before. There was something brought up about annexation of the Barrier Island properties, and I think Dr. Faraday said something about a $500,000 house would experience a $42 increase. I just wanted to, according to my calculations, your millage rate would go up by about 1 mil, and on a $500,000 house, that would be a $500 increase in your tax bill. I just wanted to, unless there's anybody out there who's considering annexing and thinks their tax bill's only going to go up $42, I don't want them to operate under that disillusion. I want them to know that it'd go up by about $500.
Good catch. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's all.
I do see a gentleman. Would you like to speak? I will open it up.
I don't have much to add.
Please, your name and address.
John B. Sullivan, 1500 South Highway A1A, Vero Beach. I've been there 34 years. It's about a mile north of Round Island Park. I think the issue is not whether the county and the city made bad decisions in 1996. It's just elementary fairness. If I go up to a gas pump and I pay $5 a gallon, the guy behind me pays $3.50 a gallon, that's not right. If I go to Publix, buy a bag of food, and somebody comes behind me, I pay $100, they pay $60, that's not right. Dr. Flaherty mentioned taxation without representation. Well, that's exactly why we fought the Revolutionary War. The Civil War, in which 600,000 or more soldiers were killed, was fought because it was unjust for one man to own another man and reap the profits of that man's labor. And all this gentleman has said, I've heard before or read, is just going to push everything ahead ad infinitum. The issue is fairness. Somebody made a mistake. Somebody's got to eat it, or whatever you call it. And then someone, whether it's 6 months or a year, but certainly not ad infinitum into the future, is going to have to do something about this gross inequitable situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Gabbard.
Just briefly, could I have Mr. Lee come up and just talk to you just for a second about the Public Service Commission, just so you get a little bit of understanding about that?
Yes.
John Lee's our Customer Service Director.
Good morning. John Lee, Customer Service Manager, City of Vero Beach. And yes, I read Dr. Faraday's report, and actually he spent some time with me. And on balance, most of his numbers are accurate, and I don't disagree with most of his conclusions. I would give you a slightly different perspective. He said the City of Vero Beach Municipal Electric is not regulated by the Florida Public Service Commission. That's not quite true. We're not regulated to the same degree as Florida Power and Light. We don't have to go through massive rate studies and send lobbyists up there and all those sort of things. But anytime I make a change in my rates or fees, I file them with the Florida Public Service Commission. Anything we do is filed with the Public Service Commission. Now, if they disagree with my methodology or how we did it, they can force us to go up there and go into public hearings with them and show how we came up with it. Now, there's about 32 municipal electric utilities in the state of Florida. There's 10 co-ops, and there's 4 investor-owned utilities. Every one of those utilities charge different rates. And while we're high, we're not the highest in the state. So anytime you move from one location to another, you're going to have whatever the rates are in that area. And as the city manager pointed out, we are in the middle of negotiations right now to change the direction we're going. So to change completely now and go a different direction, I don't think is a wise approach. I think you need to give us some time. I think Dr. Faraday needs to make a presentation to our Utilities Commission and to our City Council and present these same type of things there, because the City Council versus a utility authority, he's right. There are a bunch of utility authorities. Fort Pierce is a utility authority. But the members of that authority are appointed by the Fort Pierce City Council. So that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. that we're talking about. And that's the same way with Jacksonville and Kissimmee. All of those have authorities, but they're appointed by the local city council in most cases. So these are some difficult issues, and I would urge him to come talk first to our Utilities Commission and then to our city council, and then let's move in a positive direction.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Is the 60% that Mr. Baird mentioned accurate? 60% of the income from your electric facility comes from the unincorporated area of the county?
Well, let's talk a little bit about that notion of county and city, because there's really three parts. There's the city, there's Indian River Shores, and then there's the county. And my numbers are 38.7% of our customers are inside city customers, 9.6% of our customers are Indian River Shores, and 51.6% are county.
Okay. Question I would have, and maybe a solution, because you know where we're at. This has taken a long time to get where we're at, and it is what it is. And if we're going to try and correct it, but one of the things that I thought had validity, if we're a large part of that facility, because if you increase or incur liability through our utility bills, we're going to end up paying our share with no representation. And you know, one of the approaches may be, and I don't know, I'm not on the same level as you or Mr. Faraday, but I think a independent utilities commission with people appointed from the city, from the shores, and from the county would be a positive step, and particularly in good faith, and have representation, because you'd be representing all of your customers, and they'd all have a voice in it. And then, but as far as any of this goes, I would feel much better about having a position on this one way or the other after a presentation is made to either your utilities committee or to particularly to the city of Vero Beach. And I'd like to see the council have an opportunity to address these problems as one commissioner before we would step in and try to create friction, because we work in a lot of areas with the city. And I would, you know, I think it'd be the polite way to go is to have the city council have the first shot at this and see what they can come up with, and if we can work together peacefully to try and come up with a legitimate solution.
And I think that's the right route to go.
I agree with that procedure. However, now that I'm wearing the hat of the county, I do understand his position of David and Goliath. And I would hope that the quality of residents and the quality of the city administration, not wanting to go down the road that past predecessors put us in, that we would rise to the occasion, because we're in a new era now and no one wants to be bled to death.
Yes.
County residents, our city, and come together and an agreement of trying to put together, like Commissioner Wheeler suggested, the three entities, and see where we go. And I do believe, should common courtesy go to the city council with all good faith, the gentleman that you are, and the good research you've done, and present it. And then let's all try to come together and see where we move from there, because it is a very complex issue.
Right, it is.
And Madam Chair, if I may.
I just have one question. John, you said that when you said number of customers, do you mean percentage of revenue or number of customers?
Number of customers.
Okay, well, the
Customers in
percentage,
account.
yeah, but the percentage of revenue is higher from unincorporated, I think. The number of customers, we've got a lot bigger customers in the unincorporated area. You said number of customers, but the percentage of revenue you get, I think, is bigger.
Okay.
Dollars and cents.
Yeah, the percentages are
45 to 55 when you do revenue.
Madam Chair.
We're splitting hairs.
Yeah.
I had one other comment.
Okay, we'll go down the row again.
Okay, the only other thing I'd like to say is, you know, I've lived here 36, 37 years. I've lived in the unincorporated area on Florida Power and Light during that time for the most part. I'm now on city electric outside the city, and my bill's high like everybody else's. But in that 30-some years that I've lived here, I've also owned a business in the city of Vero Beach. And I've seen it go back and forth, where City Electric was less money than Florida Power and Light, and Florida Power and Light was very high. I've also seen it go the other way, where the city's gone up and Florida Power and Light's come down. So whatever solution comes up, I don't know that it's a permanent for eternity fix, because they do fluctuate. And of course, in my business, I use more electric than I did in my house, so I was much happier when their bill was less per kilowatt hour. But it will fluctuate, and I assume it will in the future like everything else. So it's not just a one-time fix.
I agree.
But you're talking representation.
That's
and-
correct.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think
That's where we're going
At
to have
least
to
you have a
come from.
voice.
Yes.
In terms of, and particularly with regard to capital expenses. That's the thing that concerns me more down the road, is the capital expenses than the current rates.
Yeah.
Oh,
That will fluctuate.
And I would think
Capital expenses are long-term.
probably, I don't know how many customers the city had in 80 or whenever it was they created the city council as the commission, utilities commission. Things have changed, population's growing. And I would think that the city would take a hard look at this and try to be fair and get representation. But I just feel better doing this after they addressed it.
Commissioner Davis?
Yes, I've got a couple questions. You said going before your Utilities Advisory Commission as well as the City Council. I think any River Shores, you should give this presentation there if they'd allow, for just to kind of pull all the players on board. But my poignant question that I'd like to ask is, we cannot be the only individuals that have ever been in this boat or are currently in this boat. As far as a municipal electric plant providing services outside their boundaries. How do other municipalities handle that, or is the way we're handling it how everybody else does it?
From what I was able to determine from the Florida Municipal Electric Association, the largest customer representation is done by the power authorities, which may have some appointment by the cities, but from what I had understood, that there are appointments within a jurisdictional area. Also, there are cities such as the city of Ocala, which has service only within its jurisdictional boundaries. There are only a handful of the 32 or 33 that are outside of its jurisdiction, as best I'm able to determine from the statistics that are available.
That's my question, though. How the handful, how do they do their representation? Or are they just like we are?
I've got a call in to the Executive Director of the Florida Municipal Electric Association. He's not returned my phone call yet because I want to probe that further.
Okay.
And I think the crux of this is that the city of Vero Beach signed a faulty contract some years ago, and we're still in that dilemma. And that's unique.
There's nothing we can do about that.
No, but that's unique, and you can't compare that to
right.
down the
It's
road.
just the representation issue. I was wondering how they handle that.
Commissioner Wheeler?
You mentioned Ocala, and I used to live there, but I just wonder, how do they do it when they annex? They've annexed, they're better than twice the size of the city they used to be, and I wonder, and you said it's all within their city jurisdiction.
That's what I'm told.
I'm just wondering how they transfer the electric. In other words, if they go annex 3 square miles, I wonder how they transfer that in going through the Utilities Commission, all that stuff.
That I don't know.
Okay.
There are actually irregular areas of the county, or excuse me, of the city, right on some corners where they're actually serviced by the county water and sewer. So there's irregularities and everything. That I'm not quite sure.
Commissioner Flesher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Davis had already lodged 2 of my questions. However, Dr. Faraday, I just want to thank you. I thought that our discussion over a month ago for about 2 hours had just about covered it all, and it still doesn't.
No.
I commend you for your research, and I believe you've been commended by the City of Vero Beach for your extensive research, knowledge, and understanding. I share the same concern that things have changed since 1979. The geographics have changed, the demographics, the cost factors have changed, and most certainly the cost burden on our citizens, our constituents, have also significantly changed, and more than likely are not in the same or are disparate as to what they should be accustomed to be paying. With that said, and you made an inference about David and Goliath, David won. And I don't believe that he had what you had. So I want to tell you that my money's counting on you to make that same presentation to the City of Vero Beach. And I think that we heard from Jim Gabbard that there's some open-mindedness, and it may be a large task to overcome, but I don't think that you have the burden that you are anticipating, and I believe that we do have some consideration, and I trust that the City of Vero Beach will be that open. I'd like to afford them the opportunity to do that. We do have an interest at stake here, not to send forward a petition or a resolution as per se, although our constituents are also in the balance of this decision. And speaking as one county commissioner, I will be here for you.
Thank you.
So I believe that we need to move forward with your presentation to the City of Vero Beach, and we will anxiously await the response and the information.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner O'Brien, sorry.
I concur pretty much with everybody. This will be a very complex and, unfortunately, I think time-consuming process to work this out. And I guess one thing I'd like to bring up in the immediate time frame, what kind of relief we can provide for those county residents on city electric, and looking at the fact they're getting hit with two different franchise fees, one for county services, one for city services. I wonder, can the city consider waiving that 10% franchise fee to the county residents since they're not getting city services?
That's a question, of course, I can't answer. The first thing would be to bring that up to our Utilities Commission, who would look at the impact of that, and then, of course, make a recommendation to our City Council. It'd be no different than me asking you today to waive your 6% franchise fee. Obviously, your staff would have to look at that long and hard because that's dollars in tough budget times.
Right, but that county franchise fee is for county services to county residents. They're paying 10% city franchise fee for no city services. So in an issue of fairness, I think...
I'm a bit confused by that answer. We collect 6% of our total revenue and give it to the county as a franchise fee for us doing business in the county.
Correct. And that money is used to provide services to the county residents.
Right.
Okay. You're collecting 10% from the county residents that go into the city coffers for city services. So you're collecting 10% from county residents and you're not providing county services.
I understand your logic, but again, that'd be something that would be presented to the Utilities Commission and a recommendation to the City Council, because historically and by statute, that's been allowed and required. So obviously that would take some analysis to simply strike it is not something we would do.
The statute allows it but doesn't require it.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, so what I'm hearing from everybody is that you'll go through the process, and but in the same road, we'll all jointly form a committee or whatever term you want to put on it from the three entities and try to come up with some level thinking.
Well, the county will initiate that?
I think the best thing to do, again, is to have him make his presentation to the Utilities Commission, ask them to make a recommendation to the City Council, and then at a City Council meeting, let him make his presentation and let them decide. Because I'm a staff person. We don't do that, just as you make the big decisions. Policies. So we have to let the council have an opportunity, I believe, to speak to the issue.
Right, and I agree with that completely. But on the other hand, I do think that we've come to an era now that we all jointly have to work together. So we can do the very best we can for everyone. And so if you have no objections to that, if the city has no objections to that, and Indian River Shores have no objections to that, I think that would be the prudent thing to do, and see if the think tank can come up with something.
I agree.
I mean, we have to start.
And I guess, Madam Chair, to get straight to Dr. point there, you have that task to accomplish.
Right.
Once you get that done, then we come back and then we can have, we get some direction, or at least know their position and their posture for us to move forward then. But until we get that, everything that we're doing up here would be premature.
Right. I think that the reference to studying long and hard would cause me some concern.
Absolutely.
That's an obvious way of delaying things.
Yeah.
It has to be quick. We know things that are being raised today.
Right.
The studies on that can start this afternoon. So the long part can really be substantially compressed. It would fit in with the committee or any other type of presentation, because the report's been available for 2 months.
Right. Okay. Right. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the Commission's attention.
And thank the city for coming, and it's always good to see you. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. will come back to order, please. We do have one person in the audience who would like to speak to the last issue, and I would be happy to accommodate you. Name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. Bill Walker, 2295 St. Christopher Lane, Vero Beach. And, well, I guess my notes would actually have me restating a little bit of what has already been covered by many people, but I represent a community south of, just north of the county line, 12 residents who are very concerned about the inequities that we see with the two different fees and structures. We pay 38% more than the Florida Power and Light. Have we been with Florida Power and Light? 36% power cost adjustment, and I think that's expected to go higher, probably with the natural gases continue to go higher. And we pay the higher rates than those in the city. And I guess the inequities is the biggest argument for my people that I represent. And I think you've touched on that, and I think everybody feels that maybe we ought to take a look. And that would be probably a first step easier out if the city would take a look at that. We've been unable to get power lines buried by being with the city. We share, actually with the other gentleman that spoke, Dr. Sullivan, a power line that goes through the woods, and when we were out at Hurricane Francis, we were out for 11 days. They really should be buried, and we can't really get on a list for that program if there is still such a program. So we're looking at that, at going with the Florida Power and Light as possibly a solution to that problem. So I guess on behalf of the residents, I just ask that you all take a close look at this and do what's right for everybody. With the property taxes and the insurance we all pay, here's an element where we might be able to save a little money. We can't control the other two, but I ask for your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Departmental Matters, Public Works, awarded bid number 2008012, CR 512.
Did you?
Okay. Okay, I'll back down and certainly. Yes. Anyone else come to the podium or line up. So.
My name is John Burns. I live at 1811 East Sandpoint Place in Vero Beach, and that's on the south part of the barrier island. And I'd just like to say that I think Dr. Faraty has prepared a very comprehensive and detailed report. It contains a lot of interesting facts, figures, and other tidbits of information. And as others have indicated here earlier, there does seem to be an inequity. In fact, there is an inequity in the rates that are being paid by the people who are serviced by the Vero Beach Utilities Company and the county as opposed to the rates that are paid by the people in the city. And then to find out that part of the excess that is received by the city is then devoted to the county, to the city's general fund, is not only inequitable, but I think it's discriminatory. So I fully support Dr. Faraty's report and the recommendations that he's made. And I'd like to make two additional suggestions, if I may. And these can be carried out regardless of what else is done and during the course of time that Dr. Faraty's recommendations are making its way through the administrative process. My first recommendation is that the County Commission immediately contact people in the city of Vero Beach and ask them to equalize the charges made to the city utility customers and the county utility customers. We should each be paying the same amount. There shouldn't be a disparity between the two. My second recommendation is that the County Commission contact city government and ask them that if there's any excess monies left over after collecting the utilities bills and so forth and meeting their expenses, that this be put into a reserve account to be used for future anticipated or unanticipated expenditures such as moving the water sewer plant or upgrading or even changing the electric generators. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this issue? Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, now, Public Works. Award of bid number 2008012, CR 512, Phase 4, memorandum dated December 19, 2007, 324 to 350.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
did we do the public notice?
we pulled.
Oh, we
That
pulled
was
that?
pulled.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Not too close, Jim.
Jim Davis, Public Works Director. Bids were received on November the 14th, 2007 for the County Road 512 Phase 4 project, and we were fortunate to receive 13 bids, all of which were under our engineer's estimate. The low bid was submitted by H&J Contracting, which is an out-of-town contractor, and the low bid was $8,584,040.58, which was about almost $5 million under the engineer's estimate. The reason we feel that the bids came in so low is due to the economic environment and the fact that development has dropped off so much and contractors are hungry right now. Just one note I wanted to add. Of the $8.5 million contract, about $1.1 million of that is for the Coquina Rock base. And last night you heard quite a bit of debate and testimony on Coquina Rock and how much the county uses in its projects. The bid for the rock was about $1.1 million, and about half of that cost is in the trucking and installation. So maybe half of that is actually the material of the Coquina Rock, which would be about $550,000, or less than 10% of the contract. So I just thought you'd be interested in that statistic. But staff does recommend you award the bid to the low bidder, H&J Contracting, which hasn't done any county major road work in the past. But Chris Kafer and his staff have researched their qualifications and has done reference checks, and Chris is here to talk about that if you wish to hear it. The second bidder is Cheatham Construction, who's doing the Phase 3 work right now. And they sort of had an advantage because they're mobilized and they know the area, but they were the number 2 bidder, and they were about $400,000 higher than the first low bidder.
Any questions of staff?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just real quick, maybe this might be a bill. Bill, do we have a date whenever we are going before the governor and the cabinet on the land swap for 102nd Terrace and 101st?
No. Bill DeBrawl on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. No, we don't have an exact date. I heard from Charlie Hardy, our consultant in Tallahassee that's helping us on this yesterday. We've received comments now from the Division of State Lands, and we have to respond to those comments. As soon as we do, we'll be able to get a date. I'm thinking sometime in March.
What were the general terms of the comments? What were is there an issue we need to be aware of?
No, I don't think it's going to be an issue that will create a stumbling block. The issue with the Division of State Lands is the abandonment of the road. It was dedicated to the county as right-of-way, and once we abandon that, the Division of State Lands is concerned whether or not they will receive fee simple title clear of any encumbrances. I've pointed them at the statute that indicates that they will. I've given them my opinion and Will's opinion that we believe they will have clear title to the property, fee simple interest. We need to do a little bit more convincing of them, and I think we can get there.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Utilities, Services, Rockbridge, Stormwater Protection, memorandum dated January 3, 2007, 351 to 352.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Number 2, State Road 60 and 66th Avenue to 84th Avenue. Conflict resolution with FDOT, drainage, pavement, and traffic signal improvements, approval of work orders for engineering design services to retain Schulke, Biddle, and Stoddard, and Mastel, Moeller, Reed, and Taylor, and approval of project for public bid UCP number 3026.
Move approval. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Thank you very much. Special districts and boards, Emergency Service District, approval of minutes, regular meeting of December 11.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Contract with Barth Construction, Inc. to pour the foundation and drive areas for the new fire training facility.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Yes.